Okay, it is 20 March, and this is George H.W. Bush's funeral from over 3 years ago. That's Henry Kissinger sitting in the back. He looks like he's sleeping, but he could be meditating. So I want to just talk about his life and his input real quick because George Bush Sr. was the king of the dark sun, and Henry Kissinger has remained in politics since way back in the Nixon administration. So let's discuss some of his lifelong highlights. So as you can see, this is from Wikipedia, and as it says in the book of Revelation, there are imitation Jews who function in our society. This man must be one of them because George Bush was the king of the dark sun, and he was a prominent figure sitting in the rear of the international delegation, not the American delegation, at George Sr.'s funeral. So as you can see, he's 98 years old, and oh, by the way, he was born in Munich, Germany, and he's accomplished quite a bit, but please understand that it says here that he was a Jewish refugee who fled Nazi Germany with his family in 1938 and became he rose to be the national security advisor. But I'll tell you what, there are imitation Jews of the Third Temple, and there are Nazis. So take your pick with this man. We'll talk about him fleeing the Nazis and then some of the work he did in the army. Let's jet right down there because I didn't know this about him. So let's see what Henry Kissinger was up to in the army. Well, he went through basic training at Camp Croft in South Carolina in 1943. Big time for World War II. George Bush was in the army also at that time. Or, I'm sorry, he was in the Navy. It was that window where he was rescued on a submarine, and the pilots, they tried to get a hold of him before he was rescued by the Nazi side. The American humans were consumed as cannibals. So, in Kissinger's case, let's say that he has lived a very long life, and somehow he's compensating with his existence with how he operates. And they're all cannibals. So, in Kissinger's military case at World War II, please note what occurred with him. He was in the 84th Infantry Division, and he was doing he kind of got involved on the intelligence side. So he was in military intelligence section of the division. And then he saw combat, and he volunteered for hazardous duties during the Battle of the Bulge. So now we have a former supposed Nazi guy who fled, who is assuming a military position as an alleged American for the Battle of the Bulge. So we'll find out someday exactly what he did. But realize that, Pete Shoemaker drove us through IEDs, so this is how they fight. And, they killed Pat Tillman in static defense. So the Nazis and the Germans really never forget. And in this case, this guy fled Germany, and now he's back in an American Army uniform back in Germany. So even though he's only a private, he's put in charge of a damn city because of lack of German speakers on the division's intel staff. So he got all organized, and then he's reassigned to the Counterintelligence Corps, where he became a special agent holding the rank of sergeant. He was given charge of a team in Hanover assigned to track down Gestapo officers and other saboteurs. So let me explain what Kissinger likely did. First of all, the job of a counterintelligence person in the military is to figure out what the bad guy is interested in coming to get. And then you, by virtue of knowing what he wants, by kind of watching his spies and what you know their needs are, you better protect yourself for example, if you put a bunch of nets out to keep aerial satellite pictures, that's kind of a counterintelligence effort. In the case of a human intelligence, you're out there figuring out who the people are in Germany who may be good guys, bad guys, and you're getting ahead of the picture from a force protection standpoint. Now, this is World War II, so they could have had some different applications, but that's essentially the difference between an offensive collection officer who's going to get the info to tell his boss, who's an infantry guy, they're over there, go get them. The counterintelligence guy is not doing that. He's going through all the friendly guy stuff to see what we might be giving up so that the enemy can get. So he's protecting us, but he's also learning about what the other guys are, who they are. So this guy's in charge of tracking down Gestapo officers. And let me tell you what, if you believe that Henry Kissinger, if they were actually real, let's say the dark side, let's use light, forces of the light and forces of the dark. Henry Kissinger was all about figuring out where the dark guys were to either warn them or to get substitutes that, got caught holding the bag so they could get prosecuted. So that's what I'd like to say about Kissinger. And in conclusion of him, there's a lot more to say because I'll continue on him, so I'll hit the pause button after I say this. So Kissinger was a Nazi. He was embedded as a Nazi. They never lost World War II, and he assumed prominent positions in our country all throughout the Bush era after Bush inherited the dark son from Hitler, and they went down to Neuschwabenland. So just look at what Kissinger said, that his experience in the army made him feel like an American. It made him feel like an American, but you know what? He's not an immigrant like Trump wants to hack up, because Donald Trump read the snake poem for the third time and he's after the immigrants. Well, let me pause and see what else there is to say. Okay, and just to catch you up on one other thing you'll find interesting about Kissinger is concerning nuclear weapons and the Eisenhower years. So you're looking at 55 and 56, where he's at the Council of Foreign Relations, which we know governors need to commit a ritual murder to be on the CFR. So by the time by the time Kissinger was at this point, between his time in Europe and everything else, he had blood on his hands. So he is now on the CFR, and he is a study director in nuclear weapons. So please understand from an ascended standpoint that our creator and source, all the angels that regulate everything, recognize that when Truman dropped the bombs, it was significant, and a lot of souls came to Earth and were born to bring a lot of love to the planet for right now. So back in those days, Eisenhower made the decision, because he was approached by the ascended extraterrestrials, and he chose to retain nuclear weapons for use by America in exchange for giving up the extraterrestrials for study. In exchange for giving up humans to extraterrestrials by abduction, psychological or physical, for study. So what's interesting about Kissinger's doctrinal perspective on nukes is that, again, Eisenhower retained control of the weapons. He saw a communist plot, allegedly, and the American doctrine coming from that was the massive retaliation of nuclear weapons. Like, if you hit us, we're going to destroy everything. So Kissinger very interestingly, has the authority to make this controversial proposal that you can use tactical nuclear weapons on a regular basis to win wars. And I can tell you that conventionally in the American military, we have nuclear weapons down to the division level in selected divisions. Because when I was in an infantry division in the 101st, I was trained as a nuclear explosives guy with a backpack nuke to potentially detonate it if it was required. So this guy is the one that said, hey, let's not use the nukes as a big scare tactic that will never destroy the world with each other. Let's go ahead and consider deploying them so we can get away with the megatonnage that we're allowed to do. And then I have no idea what this study is, but you know, Kissinger he's known as a guy that's, he likes to write history. He's already published, you know, kind of long ago in the Wall Street Journal, everything that's going on with the COVID, you know, for the past couple of years, coming and going. What really happened, in the words of Henry Kissinger, has already been put in the documentation for the future. Like, he wants to ensure history reads that way. So to that extent, he tried to rewrite some things here concerning the balance of power. And then you could see in 56 to 58, boom, he's back there in Rockefeller. The Rockefellers are illuminated. They're an illuminated family, and they're responsible to ensure that the Council of Saturn broadcasts and command and control to the Vatican at the 440 control level, because they made the world standard 440 hertz in A minor for music and instruments to be tuned, and there's a reason for that, because that's 8 octaves faster than 432, and that's natural rhythm. So they mess with it, and it causes issues at quantum levels that are true. So when you really peel back the onion on a person like Henry Kissinger and his Zionist Nazi tendencies, I mean, you can read what it says right here, but essentially he's a closet communist, socialist, communist, Marxist, Leninist, Maoist. That's Henry Kissinger. Of Solomon, it's the collective sledgehammer on one side, and then the Nazi mastermindedness on the other side. And to an extent, he's kind of got both covered. So this man is just very significant. You're looking at, it doesn't get much higher. Look at his accomplishment on developing the world. In this case, we've got this is all Fabian dialectic, okay? The Soviet Union is a big show. The guys at the top are a show. They have dinner together. Putin has dinner with the guy in the Ukraine now. It's a Fabian club. So during this period, he was kind of running it from a dialogue standpoint. And then he went over to speak with Zhou Enlai, who's the predecessor, one or two back from, you know, the current man in China. And he came back with the pandas to reproach and bring us China and all the growth. And it just pushed the whole story. Kissinger helped push the whole story over to China, because they started selling us stuff and they came on strong. And now, in October of 2019, Trump gave up our food and e-currency to them in the flagship deal. So there's a lot to be said about where we're set up for in the future right now, because I could show you linkage where he routinely communicates with Jared Kushner as a counselor. Okay, Kissinger does that right now. And Kushner owns FEMA, and he's doing prosperity and the Gaza false peace. And there's going to be some trouble over there in the Easter window with the sledgehammer of Solomon and everything that it translates to all over the globe. All over the globe. So we'll see how that pans out. But Henry Kissinger has been in the middle of our storyboard for about as long as George Bush. If you look at when he came on the scene, you've got an equivalent career. And he's still with us. He's the oldest living guy now in the system because George Shultz died in 2021. And this guy, look what he did. He opened China up. I mean, he's been going at it for a long time. Look at this guy. Just look at him. You're looking at a man of law right here. So, that's Kissinger. And that's me. Now, we'll find out. Kissinger can't have too much longer to go, because it seems like they're cycling out right at the 99-year mark. All the people of law, you know, Betty White, I don't know who else, but George Bush Sr., you know, he had his funeral, and then be advised that George Jr. handed Trump a coin, whoop, at the ceremony. The same one that started this video where you saw Kissinger sitting there in a meditative snooze during the international part. So Bush Jr. gave Trump a coin, and then he gave everybody else envelopes. And the envelopes had some news from the deceased Bush Sr., who was telling everybody, they know everything, I'm sorry. And they means us. Like we've caught up to it, and they all act surprised at this. So there's a separate video to be done for that. But, you know, the opposite would be, look at what Bush did. He gave his children a note after he was dead. It said, up. They know everything, I'm sorry. And Jeb was shocked, and what's her name, Laura Bush was shocked. George Jr., he's a player, so he's still in it. And all the presidents were shocked. The Bidens were shocked. Trump was okay. Carter was shocked. You know, on and on. They read it, and you could see, what? Joe Biden and all that. But the show goes on. There was a handoff to Trump. So he's got the con right now. And what does that really mean? You know, what does it mean? It means that there's still things happening that need to close out so we can get done with this and move on to better things. But it's an interesting season, so it's worth talking about. And y'all have a good night, and keep love in your heart and love above everything. Because if you love your creator and you love your fellow man, you can't be hurt by vibrational energy because you vibrate above it. That's how it works. So have a great night.